The fluorescent lights of Walter Reed Medical Center flickered at 6:15 a.m., casting long shadows across the sterile hallways of the third floor. The overnight shift was ending, and exhaustion hung in the air like morning fog over the Potomac.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Captain
Keep that
Kira
rhythm, don't
Thorne
stop.
stood 5'3" in her pale blue scrubs,
Happening.
blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun that would have made her drill
Check your mags and
instructors
optics.
proud.
We move in 5.
To everyone
Roger
around
that.
her,
Rifles
she
are
was
green.
just another new nurse, young, eager, still learning the ropes of military medicine. She'd been there 6 weeks now, 6 weeks of bedpans and blood pressure cuffs, 6 weeks of playing small and incompetent while her real mission unfolded in the shadows. 6 weeks of invisible investigation into something that had haunted her for 21 years. But right now, standing in the staff locker room at the end of another 12-hour shift, all she wanted was a hot shower and 30 minutes where she didn't have to pretend to be someone she wasn't. The women's locker room was blessedly empty. Thank God for small mercies. Kira peeled off the scrubs that smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, and the particular staleness that came from spending half a day around illness and death. Her muscles ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that reminded her she was still sharp, still capable, even while playing this soft civilian role that felt like wearing someone else's skin. She caught her reflection in the mirror as she headed for the showers. 5'3", 118 pounds, the smallest Marine in Force Recon history, or so they'd told her when she graduated. They'd told her a lot of things, that she was too small, too weak, that women didn't belong in special operations, that she'd never make it through the training. They'd been wrong about everything except her size. Kira stepped into the shower stall, letting the scalding water pound against her shoulders. The heat was almost painful, but she welcomed it. For just these few minutes, she could stop being Kira the nurse. She could remember who she really was. Captain Kira Thorne, Marine Force Recon, Scout Sniper, call sign, Phantom. 73 confirmed kills across 6 years in Afghanistan, the kind of record that most male Marines never achieved in their entire careers. The hot water ran clear as it washed away the carefully applied makeup that made her look younger, more innocent. The fake fatigue she wore like armor during her shifts, all of it circling down the drain, leaving behind the warrior underneath. She'd come to Walter Reed hunting ghosts, 11 of them to be precise. 11 decorated veterans dead in 9 months, all right here in this building, and nobody asking the right questions except her. The memory of her mother's suicide note flashed through her mind, unbidden but never far from her thoughts. 21 years old now, that note, but Kira could still recite every word. Kira, my darling girl, I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore. The nightmares, the not knowing. Your father didn't die the way they said. I know he didn't. But nobody will listen. Nobody will help. They're lying to us, baby, about everything. Don't trust them. Find the truth. Make them pay. I love you. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough to stay. Mom. Kira had been 8 years old when she found her mother's body. 8 years old when she read those words and made a promise that would shape the next 21 years of her life. She turned off the water and reached for her towel. That's when she heard it. The slam of the locker room door hitting the wall. The frantic slap of shoes on tile. Running. Someone was running. Kira! Vivian Ashford. The head nurse burst around the corner before Kira could even process what was happening. 60 years old with iron gray hair pulled back severe enough to give lesser women headaches. Eyes that had seen too much in 40 years of military medicine. Vivian was the type who never panicked. She was panicking now. Code Blue, room 307, Sergeant Garrett's crashing. Kira's training kicked in before conscious thought could intervene. She grabbed her towel, wrapped it around herself, and ran. Water dripped from her hair, leaving a trail across the tile floor. Her bare feet slapped against the cold linoleum as she sprinted behind Vivian down the corridor. The third floor erupted in controlled chaos, nurses rushing, a crash cart rattling down the hallway, and Kira, wearing nothing but a towel, sprinting toward room 307 like her life depended on it, because someone else's life did. She hit the doorway at full speed, shoulder catching the frame as she pivoted into the room. It was packed. 2 doctors, 3 nurses, all crowded around the bed where Sergeant Tommy Garrett lay motionless. The heart monitor showed a flat line, screaming its digital death song in a pitch that every medical professional learned to hate. Dr. Elliot Vance, the department head, was performing chest compressions, but his technique was wrong. Kira saw it immediately with the eye of someone who'd performed combat medicine under fire in places where help was hours away and mistakes meant death. Too shallow, wrong tempo, hands positioned incorrectly, too low on the sternum, pressing into the stomach instead of the heart. He was going through the motions, but this man wasn't trying to save Garrett. He was watching him die. Move! The word came out harder than Kira intended. She didn't care. Doctor. Vance's head snapped up, irritation flashing across his aristocratic features. Nurse, this is not... Move! Kira shoved past him. Her towel caught on the door handle. She felt it slip, felt the cool air hit her bare shoulder, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Her hands found Garrett's chest, found the correct position, 2 inches above the xiphoid process. Heel of one hand, other hand on top, elbows locked. She began compressions. Exactly 100 beats per minute, hard enough to save a life, deep enough to restart a heart. She could hear her instructor's voice in her head from combat medicine training, from BUD/S before the Navy changed the name, from every moment of the grueling education that had transformed her from a grief-stricken teenager into a weapon. Staying alive. Staying alive. Aha, staying alive. The Bee Gees as a training tool. It would have been funny if a man weren't dying beneath her hands. 30 compressions. Then she tilted Garrett's head back, pinched his nose, gave 2 breaths. His chest rose and fell. Good seal. She went back to compressions. 30 more. Hard enough to crack ribs if necessary. That's what it took sometimes. Breaking someone's bones to restart their heart. Behind her, someone gasped. Kira didn't need to look to know what they'd seen. Her towel had slipped further when she'd leaned forward to give rescue breaths. Not far enough to be indecent, but far enough. Far enough to expose the dog tags hanging around her neck. Black, anodized steel tags. Non-reflective, the kind issued to special operations. Etched in precise military lettering. Thorn, Kira M, USMC, Force Recon. But it wasn't just the tags. On her left shoulder, now partially visible, was the tattoo she'd gotten the day she graduated from Force Recon training. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marine Corps. And superimposed over it, the distinctive recon diver bubble that marked her as one of the elite. The mark that said she'd survived hell. That said she'd earned her place among the warriors. That said everything her 5'3" frame seemed to contradict. The room went silent except for the sound of her compressions and the steady rhythm of rescue breathing. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. On the 4th cycle, Garrett's heart monitor jumped. A blip, then another, then a rhythm. Weak and thready, but there. His eyes fluttered open, confused and scared. Easy, Kira said softly, professionally, her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. You're okay, Sergeant. We've got you. Only then did she pull her towel back up, covering the tags in the tattoo. But the damage was done. Every person in that room had seen. Every person in that room now knew that the quiet, clumsy nurse who'd been dropping IV bags and fumbling with blood pressure cuffs for 6 weeks was something else entirely. And in the corner, standing perfectly still, with eyes like a hawk tracking prey, was a man Kira had noticed before, but never spoken to. Colonel Dalton Pierce, supposedly just an old veteran who liked to spend time with the wounded warriors at Walter Reed. A volunteer visitor with too much time on his hands and a kind word for the broken men who filled these beds. Those steel gray eyes met hers for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. 3 seconds where Kira watched him take in every detail. The tags, the tattoo, the precision of her medical technique, the way she held herself even wrapped in nothing but a towel. Then he turned and walked out of the room without a word. Kira knew in her gut, with the instinct that had kept her alive through 6 years of combat, that her cover was blown. The only question was whether Colonel Dalton Pierce was an asset or a threat. That night after her shift ended at midnight, Kira didn't go to the small apartment she'd rented in Alexandria as part of her cover. Instead, she drove her anonymous Toyota Camry across the river to a storage facility in Arlington that catered to military personnel. The facility was automated. No staff, just security cameras that she knew how to avoid, and electronic locks that she'd learned to bypass in a different lifetime. She parked in the back, away from the main entrance, and made her way to Unit 247. The lock required both a key and a thumbprint to open. Multiple layers of security for what was essentially her real life, stored in a 10 by 10 climate-controlled room. Inside, everything was organized with the precision that came from years of military discipline. Plastic storage containers stacked neatly, labels on everything, an inventory system that would have made a supply sergeant proud. But the most important items were in the footlocker against the back wall. Military grade, locked with both a key and a thumbprint scanner. The kind of security that screamed classified materials inside to anyone who knew what they were looking at. Kira opened it, her Sig Sauer M18, the Marine-issue handgun she'd carried through 6 years of combat, cleaned and oiled, ready for use. Her K-bar combat knife. 7 inches of steel that had saved her life more than once in close-quarters situations where shooting wasn't an option. Her lockpick set. Legitimate purchase for a Marine who'd gone through advanced entry training, but not something a nurse would have any reason to own. Her encrypted tablet, loaded with communications software and security bypass programs that were definitely not approved for civilian use. And the photos. Always the photos. She took out the worn picture she carried on every deployment, the family photo from 1998. She was 2 years old in the image, sitting on her father's shoulders. Master Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Thorne, Force Recon, grinning at the camera with a kind of unguarded happiness that only came from moments stolen between deployments. Her mother Rachel standing beside them, strong and proud in her Marine dress uniform, one hand resting on her husband's shoulder, the other reaching up to hold her daughter's tiny hand. Both of them gone now. Dad supposedly killed in Afghanistan in 2003. Mom dead by her own hand 5 years later. The grief and PTSD finally winning a battle she'd fought for too long alone. Kira had been 12 years old when she found her mother's body. 12 years old when she read the suicide note that changed everything. The note that transformed a grieving child into someone with a purpose, a mission, a reason to survive when survival would have been easier to give up. Don't trust them. Find the truth. Make them pay. Kira had spent 16 years following those instructions, through high school where she became the smallest varsity athlete in her school's history, through the Naval Academy where she graduated top of her class in physical fitness despite being the shortest midshipman, through Force Recon training where she was one of only 3 women to complete the course in her class. She'd become one of the youngest Marine captains in history, the first female Marine to achieve 73 confirmed kills as a scout sniper, the kind of warrior her father had been, carrying on a legacy that was supposed to have ended in the mountains of Afghanistan. Except it hadn't ended, because her father hadn't died the way they said. Kira was sure of it now. The Thorne protocol file proved it. Whatever had killed these 11 men at Walter Reed was connected to her father's death, connected to Operation Iron Resolve, connected to secrets that people were willing to commit murder to protect. She put the photo back, secured the footlocker, and loaded her gear into a small backpack. Nothing that would draw attention, just a young woman leaving a storage unit late at night, probably grabbing some off-season clothes or old college textbooks. Kira drove back to Walter Reed, arriving at 1:47 a.m. She parked in the visitor lot, used her nurse ID to enter through a side entrance, and made her way to the 5th floor using the service stairs. She'd timed this route a dozen times over the past 6 weeks. She knew exactly how long it took, exactly where the cameras were, exactly which hallways the security guards patrolled, and when. Pierce was waiting in the shadowy alcove near room 507. He was dressed in dark clothes, no longer the kindly old veteran visitor, but something harder and more dangerous. Something that reminded Kira he'd been force recon when she was still learning to walk. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Always." They moved through the darkened hospital like ghosts, Pierce leading the way through routes he'd clearly scouted extensively. He knew every camera blind spot, every security patrol pattern, every door that wasn't monitored because budget cuts had forced the hospital to prioritize the patient areas. At 2:03 a.m., they reached Dr. Vance's office. The lock was electronic, a modern security measure that was supposed to be unpickable. But Kiera had tools for that. She pulled a small device from her pocket, no bigger than a credit card, and pressed it against the lock's sensor. The device worked its magic, cycling through electronic signatures until it found one the lock recognized. 30 seconds later, the light turned green and the bolt clicked open. Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Where did you get that?" "Marine intelligence has better toys than you might think," Kira said. Inside, Vance's office was obsessively organized, everything in its place. Diplomas arranged on the wall by date and importance, medical textbooks organized by subject, and then alphabetically by author. A desk so clean it looked like a display model in a furniture store. But it was the filing cabinet that drew Kira's attention. "That one," she whispered, pointing. Pierce stood watch at the door while Kira went to work on the cabinet lock. This one was mechanical, old school, the kind that required actual lockpicks instead of electronic bypass tools. She pulled out her kit and selected 2 picks. The work was delicate, requiring feel more than sight. Kira closed her eyes and let her fingers do the seeing, feeling for the pins inside the lock, finding each one and lifting it to the correct height. 2 minutes later, she had it open. Inside were patient files organized alphabetically. Standard medical records that would bore anyone who took the time to read them. But in the back, hidden behind the legitimate files like a dirty secret, was a separate folder marked in red ink. IR 90. Iron Resolve 1990. Kira pulled it out and opened it on Vance's desk. Her blood ran cold. Medical records for 247 service members. All of them had participated in Operation Iron Resolve during Desert Storm. All of them had received something called Vaccine Protocol 7 between December 1990 and February 1991. Each record had a color-coded status marker, green for living, yellow for active monitoring, red for deceased. 11 red sheets on top, the 11 dead men, 9 yellow sheets beneath them. The 9 still alive at Walter Reed, still under Vance's care, still receiving whatever poison he was giving them. Paper clipped to the front was a document that made Kira's hands shake as she photographed it with her encrypted phone. Project Lazarus, classified, eyes only. Initiated September 1989. Objective, development of combat endurance enhancement through biochemical modification. Test subjects, 500, Desert Storm deployment. Current status, Stage 4, Elimination Protocol. Active authorization, Deputy Director Gideon Blackwell, CIA. Elimination Protocol. They weren't just covering up an experiment gone wrong. They were actively murdering everyone who knew about it, systematically, methodically, with the full authority of the Central Intelligence Agency. Kira pulled out her phone and started photographing pages as fast as she could. Every document, every medical record, every piece of evidence that proved what was happening here. 30 seconds, Pierce whispered from the door. Security's early. Kira grabbed the physical folder and shoved it inside her jacket. If they couldn't photograph everything, they'd take the originals. Let Vance explain to his CIA handlers how 247 classified medical records just disappeared. They slipped out of the office just as footsteps echoed down the hallway. A security guard doing his rounds, flashlight beams sweeping across the walls. Pierce and Kira pressed themselves into a recessed doorway, barely breathing, as the guard passed within 3 feet of their position. He walked by without looking their way. They moved quickly through the basement corridors, following Pierce's predetermined escape route, down the service stairs, through the maintenance tunnels that most staff didn't even know existed, out into the underground parking structure where Pierce's truck waited in a corner spot away from cameras. They'd almost reached it when Kira heard the sound that every warrior learns to recognize instantly, the click of a safety being released. "That's far enough, Captain." 6 armed men emerged from behind vehicles, all wearing tactical gear that screamed private military contractor. And leading them, holding a Glock 19 with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it, was a woman Kiera had worked alongside for 6 weeks. Vivian Ashford, the head nurse. The woman who'd called her to Garrett's room that morning. The woman who'd seemed so professional, so dedicated, so genuinely concerned about her patients. Except Vivian wasn't holding a medical chart anymore. She was holding a pistol, and it was pointed directly at Kira's chest. "Vivian," Pierce said, and there was genuine shock in his voice. "How long?" "Since the beginning," Vivian replied. Her voice was steady, professional, like she was discussing a patient's treatment plan instead of holding them at gunpoint. "Since Desert Storm. I was a combat nurse back then, Dalton. I administered Protocol 7 to the first test group. I was there when we thought we were making history, when we thought we were creating the future of warfare." She gestured with the pistol. "The folder. Hand it over." Kira's hand was inside her jacket, fingers wrapped around her Sig Sauer. 6 hostiles, 2 of them. Bad odds, but not impossible. She'd faced worse in Helmand Province when her spotter got hit, and she had to fight her way out alone against 11 Taliban fighters. But that had been in the open, with room to maneuver. This was a parking garage with concrete pillars and vehicles limiting movement. And Pierce, for all his experience, was 68 years old. She didn't know if he could still move fast enough to survive a firefight. "How were we supposed to know it would kill them 30 years later?" Vivian continued, and there was something in her voice now. Guilt, maybe? Or justification? Or both? "We were trying to save lives, make our soldiers stronger, more resilient, better able to survive combat and come home to their families." "You knew," Kira said flatly. "That's why you're killing them now. To hide what you did, to prevent the truth from coming out. To prevent panic," Vivian corrected. "To protect national security. Do you have any idea what would happen if this became public? The lawsuits, the criminal prosecutions, the collapse of trust in military medicine?" "You murdered 11 men," Pierce said. "I eased their suffering," Vivian shot back. "Every one of them was dying anyway. Protocol 7 made sure of that. All I did was spare them months of agony and prevent them from talking to the wrong people before they went." She took a step closer. "Last chance, Captain. The folder." Kira made her decision in the space between heartbeats. She threw the folder toward Vivian, using that split second of distraction to draw her Sig Sauer. But Pierce was faster. The old Marine already had his weapon out, firing before Kira's cleared her jacket. 2 shots. 2 of Vivian's men went down before they could react. The parking structure erupted in gunfire. Kira dove behind a concrete pillar, returning fire. Her training took over. The training that had been drilled into her through thousands of hours of practice until it became instinct. Breathe, aim, squeeze, center mass, always center mass. Another hostile down. Pierce was moving, using vehicles for cover. His shots were precise and controlled, each one finding its target. This wasn't some retired officer playing weekend warrior. This was a man who still had it, who'd never really lost the edge that combat gave you. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Kira counted rounds. She had maybe 10 shots left. Pierce probably the same. Against 4 remaining hostiles plus Vivian, that wasn't enough. Not unless every shot counted, and even the best shooters in the world couldn't guarantee that in the chaos of a firefight. Then her encrypted phone rang. In the middle of a firefight, with bullets ricocheting off concrete and the smell of cordite thick in the air, Kira's phone was ringing. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number, area code 571, Northern Virginia. Against all logic, against every tactical consideration, she answered. "Little busy here," she said, firing twice more at movement behind a van. "Kira." The voice on the other end was male, calm despite the obvious sounds of gunfire coming through the connection. "Baby girl, north stairwell, 3rd door on your left, service tunnel. I'm waiting at the other end." That voice, God, that voice. Kira knew it like she knew her own heartbeat, knew it from 1,000 memories that were more than 20 years old, knew it from dreams and nightmares, and the hollow ache of missing someone who was supposed to be dead. "Dad?" The word came out before she could stop it. "Move, now." Kira looked at Pierce. "North stairwell, go." They ran, laying down covering fire as they moved. Vivian and her remaining men pursued, but they were cautious now. Kira had killed 1. Pierce had killed 2. These weren't mindless contractors willing to die for a paycheck. They were professionals who suddenly realized this wasn't going to be easy. The stairwell door was exactly where the voice had said. Kira and Pierce burst through, and Kira jammed it with a fire extinguisher from the wall. It wouldn't hold long, but it would buy seconds. Sometimes seconds were all you needed. The service tunnel was dark and narrow, lit only by emergency lighting that created more shadows than illumination. They ran through it, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Behind them, the sound of the door being forced open. Vivian's team still coming. The tunnel ended at a heavy metal door with a manual release. Kira hit it and they spilled out into a loading area behind the hospital. A black SUV sat there, engine running, driver's door open. And leaning against it, silhouetted in the pre-dawn light that was just starting to paint the eastern sky, was a man Kira hadn't seen in 21 years. But she would have recognized him anywhere. Master Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Thorne, Force Recon, Scout Sniper, her father, supposedly killed in action, September 2003, standing right in front of her, very much alive. He was older, gray in his hair and beard where there'd been brown in the photos Kira carried. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, carved by stress and secrets and 2 decades of living in the shadows. But the stance was the same. The way he held himself, ready for anything, always alert. That was her father. "Hey, Phantom," he said softly. "Took you long enough to find me." Kira couldn't speak, couldn't move. 21 years of grief and anger and determination shattered in this single moment. 21 years of believing her father was dead, of carrying that loss like a weight she could never put down. And he was standing right there, alive. "We'll have time for reunions later," Garrett said, all business now. "Right now, we run." He glanced at Pierce, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Colonel, good to see you're on the right side." "Master Gunnery Sergeant," Pierce said, and there was respect and confusion warring in his voice. "We thought you were dead." "That's what they wanted everyone to think." Garrett gestured to the SUV. "Get in. They'll have the whole area locked down in 5 minutes." Behind them, Vivian and her team emerged from the loading area. Shots fired. A bullet shattered the rear windshield of the SUV, but Garrett was already moving. They piled into the vehicle. Garrett took the driver's seat, and before anyone could process what was happening, they were moving. Fast. Tires screaming as Garrett took corners at speeds that would have terrified most drivers, but were probably routine for someone who'd done 1,000 extractions under fire. For 5 minutes, nobody spoke. Garrett drove with the skill of someone who'd spent decades evading pursuit. through back streets and residential neighborhoods, constantly checking mirrors, always 3 moves ahead of anyone trying to follow. Finally, when he was satisfied they weren't being tailed, he pulled into an industrial area and parked behind an abandoned warehouse. Only then did he turn to look at his daughter. The look on his face said everything. 21 years of pain. 21 years of watching from afar. 21 years of wanting to reach out and knowing he couldn't. Kira just stared at him, at this ghost who wore her father's face, at this impossible reality that shouldn't exist. Finally, she found her voice. "Dad?" It came out small, broken, nothing like the hardened Marine captain she'd become. Garrett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he placed his hand on her shoulder. Real, solid, alive. "Yeah, baby girl," he said quietly. "It's me." And Captain Kira Thorne, who'd survived 6 years of combat in Afghanistan, who'd made 73 confirmed kills as a Marine Scout sniper, who'd endured force recon training that broke most men twice her size, finally broke down and cried. For 3 minutes, nobody spoke in the SUV parked behind that abandoned warehouse. The only sounds were Kira's ragged breathing and the distant hum of early morning traffic on the interstate. 21 years of loss and grief and carefully controlled rage finally found release. Garrett kept his hand on her shoulder, steady and solid, not saying anything, just being there, being real, being alive when he was supposed to be dead. Pierce sat in the back seat, giving them space, his tactical mind already processing implications and threats, and the fact that a man who'd been declared killed in action in 2003 was sitting in front of him, driving an SUV. Finally, Kira pulled back, wiped her eyes, found the steel that had carried her through Hell Week and sniper school and firefights in the Hindu Kush. She was still a Marine captain, still on a mission, still hunting the truth. But now that truth was sitting right next to her. "Talk," she said. Her voice was rough but steady. "Mom killed herself. I grew up thinking you'd abandon us. I need to know why." Garrett's jaw tightened. The pain that crossed his face was worse than any physical wound Kira had ever seen in combat. "If I'd stayed," he said quietly, "if I'd made contact, if I'd let anyone know I was alive, the CIA would have killed you both to get to me. Your mother, you, both dead, just to eliminate the leverage they could use against me." He turned to face her fully. "I'm sorry, Kira. God, I'm so sorry. If there had been any other way, if I could have done it differently." His voice broke. "But keeping you safe meant staying dead. It meant watching from the shadows while your mother drank herself into depression. It meant seeing you grow up alone and not being able to help." "What are you talking about?" Kira demanded. "Who would kill us? Why?" Garrett pulled out a tablet from the center console, brought up files that made Kira's blood run cold even before she started reading. "In 1990, I was one of 500 service members given an experimental vaccine," he began. "They told us it would enhance our performance, help us survive the desert conditions in Kuwait and Iraq, make us stronger, faster, more resistant to fatigue and injury." He showed her medical reports, autopsy results, classified memos with redacted signatures. What they didn't tell us was that it was based on failed Soviet experiments from the 1970s, biochemical enhancement protocols that the Russians had abandoned because every test subject died within 20 years. Kira scrolled through the documents. The science was complex, but the results were clear. Cellular breakdown at the genetic level, organ failure, tumors, neurological damage. All of it traced back to something called Vaccine Protocol 7. By 2001, veterans started showing symptoms, Garrett continued. Guys I'd served with, men who'd been in peak physical condition, suddenly they were dying. Cancers that appeared out of nowhere, hearts that just stopped, livers that failed in men who'd never touched alcohol. He pulled up more files, each one a death certificate, each one a warrior cut down not by enemy action, but by something his own government had put inside him. The CIA realized their wonder drug was actually a death sentence on a 30-year delay, Garrett said, and there was cold fury in his voice now. But instead of coming clean and trying to help us, they decided it was cheaper to eliminate the evidence. Cheaper to murder 500 veterans than to face the lawsuits and criminal charges and congressional investigations. That's why you were going to testify, Kira said, pieces falling into place. In 2003, you found out about this. You were going to expose it. I was scheduled to testify before a congressional committee, Garrett confirmed. Black budget oversight. They couldn't let that happen. So they arranged for me to have an accident in Afghanistan. His jaw tightened. Except I'd been expecting it. I had friends in the community, other victims who were putting pieces together. We shared information, watched each other's backs, and when the orders came through for that deployment, orders that didn't make tactical sense for someone with my specialization, I knew. So you faked your death, Pierce said from the back seat. We faked my death, Garrett corrected. Brothers from my old team, men who understood what was at stake. We made it look real, made it convincing enough that even Marine intelligence bought it. He looked at Kira, and the pain was raw in his eyes. And then I went underground, because they didn't stop with me. They killed anyone who knew too much, anyone who asked questions, and yes, that included families. Kira felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Mom, she whispered. I watched her from afar, Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. Saw her drinking herself to death. Saw the PTSD eating away at her. Saw her falling apart because she thought I was gone. And it killed me, Kira. It killed me every single day not to be able to help, not to be able to tell her I was still alive. He reached out, cupped her face in his hands. But if I'd revealed myself, they would have used you both as leverage, or just killed you outright. The people running this don't hesitate. They don't have moral lines they won't cross. Sloan Pierce disappeared just for stumbling across their files. Your mother would have been easy. Kira thought about that, about her mother's suicide, about the note that had driven her for years, about a woman who died not from grief, but from not knowing, from the uncertainty that had eaten away at her until there was nothing left. She thought you'd abandoned us, Kira said. That's what destroyed her, Dad, not knowing, the questions that never got answered. I know. Garrett's voice was barely a whisper, and I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. He showed her more medical reports, his own this time. Stage 4 liver cancer, kidneys failing, neurological damage that was slowly shutting down his autonomic nervous systems. The side effects, 3 decades in the making, finally catching up to him. The doctors give me 18 to 24 months, he said. Maybe less. I'm dying, Kira, just like the other 499 victims. That's why I'm done hiding. That's why I'm going to burn down everyone responsible before I go. He paused. There's one more thing you need to know. Your grandmother, Eleanor. They told you she died in 2015. Kira nodded slowly. Heart attack. I was at the funeral. That wasn't her in the casket. Garrett's voice turned to ice. The CIA took her in 2015, kept her in a facility as leverage. If I ever surfaced, they'd use her against me. She's been a prisoner for 9 years. Kira stared at her father, really looked at him for the first time since that impossible reunion. And now she could see it. The pallor beneath the tan. The way he moved, just a fraction slower than he should. The tremor in his hands that he tried to hide. But when we expose this, Garrett continued, when we go public and burn it all down, I'm getting her out. Thunder's already working on her location. How many others? Kira asked. How many survivors are still alive? 47, Garrett said. Most are too sick to fight. But I've got 4 men who are willing and able. Warriors I served with in Desert Storm. Men who have nothing left to lose and every reason to want justice. He started the SUV again. They're waiting for us in the Blue Ridge Mountains, 2 hours from here. We need to move before Vivian reports what happened, before the CIA locks down every highway between here and the Virginia border. Pierce leaned forward. You have a safe house? I've had a safe house for 21 years, Colonel. Remote, defensible, everything we need to plan our next move. Garrett pulled out of the industrial area, merging into morning traffic with the ease and invisible. Kira sat in silence, processing. Her father was alive. He'd been alive this whole time, watching from the shadows, staying dead to keep her safe. Her grandmother was alive, held prisoner by the same people who'd poisoned 500 Marines. And now her father was dying for real, killed by the same poison that had murdered 11 men at Walter Reed, and was probably killing 9 more right now. I'm with you, she said finally. Whatever you're planning, whatever it takes to bring them down, and we get Grandma Eleanor out. Garrett glanced at her, pride and pain mixing in his expression. Roger that, Captain. They drove in silence after that, heading west into the Virginia mountains, where the sun was just starting to paint the peaks, gold and crimson. Heading toward a cabin where 4 other dying warriors waited. 4 men who'd spent decades gathering evidence and planning revenge against the people who'd poisoned them. Heading toward the next phase of a war that had been going on in the shadows since 1990. The cabin appeared exactly as advertised. Wood siding weathered to gray by 3 decades of mountain winters. A stone chimney with smoke rising lazily into the morning air. Solar panels on the roof, the only concession to modern technology visible from the outside. But appearances were deceiving. As Garrett led them inside, Kira saw that the cabin had been converted into something that would make any tactical operations center jealous. Computer equipment lined one wall, multiple monitors showing news feeds and data streams. Weapon racks held enough firepower to equip a small platoon. Maps covered another wall, marked with red X's and circles and lines connecting different locations. And sitting at a table made from what looked like an old door balanced on sawhorses, drinking coffee and cleaning weapons, were 4 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a military history documentary. They stood as Garrett entered, old habits, military bearing that never quite went away, even when the body started failing. Gentlemen, Garrett said, this is my daughter, Captain Kira Thorne, and Colonel Dalton Pierce. They're part of the team now. The first man was tall and lean, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His hands were twisted with arthritis, fingers bent at angles that looked painful. Callum Garrett, he said, no relation to Kira's father, despite the shared last name. Call sign Boom, Delta Force, explosives specialist back when I had working hands. He held up those twisted fingers. The poison attacks the joints first. Turns out the same biochemistry that was supposed to make us stronger also destroys cartilage. The second man was shorter, stockier, with gray hair buzzed military short. His skin had the yellowish tinge that spoke of liver problems. Fletcher McKenzie, call sign Wheels, Ranger Battalion. I can still drive like a bat out of hell even if my kidneys are shot to shit. Excuse the language, ma'am. The third man had the weathered look of someone who'd spent years in harsh climates. His eyes were sharp, but there was something slightly off about the way he held his head, compensating for vision problems. Silas Whitmore, call sign Hawk, Force Recon, same as you, Captain. He gestured to a Barrett M82 leaning against the wall. Sniper, 400 confirmed kills across 3 wars. Figure I've got 1 more good fight left before the tumors in my brain finish the job. The fourth man was the oldest, maybe 72, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass, and he moved with the careful precision of someone managing pain. Tobias Sullivan, call sign Thunder, Force Recon, strategic planning. He looked at Kira with assessment in his gaze. You have your father's eyes, Captain, and if Garrett says you're solid, that's good enough for me. Kira shook hands with each of them, feeling the tremors in their grips, seeing the signs of the poison slowly killing them. These men were dying, Not might die someday, but actively in the process of dying. And yet they stood ready to fight, ready to go to war one last time against an enemy that had already won the only battle that mattered. "Oorah," she said softly, using the Marine Corps battle cry. "Oorah," they echoed. Pierce spread the files they'd taken from Vance's office across the table. The IR-90 folder, the Project Lazarus documentation, the kill orders signed by Deputy Director Gideon Blackwell. Boom picked up one of the documents with his twisted hands, surprisingly gentle despite the arthritis. "Authorization chain stops at Blackwell," he noted, "but there's a reference here. Per Pentagon approval, file SD7. SD7, Thunder said, already at a computer. "Secretary of Defense or someone in his office. Let me run this through some databases. See what SD7 might be." While Thunder worked, Garrett made coffee. Real coffee. The kind that was strong enough to strip paint and probably violated several Geneva Convention protocols. He poured cups for everyone, and they gathered around that makeshift table like warriors at a war council. Because that's exactly what this was. War. "We need Vance," Kira said, taking control of the tactical planning like the Marine captain she was. "He's the weak link in their organization. Get him to confess on record, and we can bypass the classification issues. A confession can't be suppressed the same way documents can." "Vance won't talk willingly," Pierce said. "He's CIA trained. He's been doing their dirty work for 40 years. He knows what happens to people who break omerta." "Then we make him unwilling," Boom said, his twisted fingers still managing to disassemble and clean a Glock with practiced efficiency. "Snatch him, bring him here, apply pressure." Garrett shook his head. "Too risky. The moment Vance disappears, they'll lock down everything, destroy records, go into full cover-up mode. We need to move faster than that." "How fast?" Kira asked. "Fast enough that they can't react. We grab Vance, get his confession, and have it ready to release publicly. All within 12 hours. Give them no time to prepare a response. No time to craft a narrative. Just the truth, raw and undeniable, before they can spin it." Hawk was looking at his phone, scrolling through something. "Problem," he said. His voice was gravelly, roughened by years of wind and sand and shouting orders in combat. "Vance has been moved to a CIA black site. According to my contacts, he's at Facility 7 Delta, about 30 miles from here." "They're protecting him," Boom said. "Or silencing him," Kira countered. "Either way, he's behind serious security now." "Then we go in and get him," Garrett said. 6 operators against a CIA facility. I've faced worse odds." Kira looked at her father with pride. "That's my line, Dad." Thunder pulled up blueprints on his computer. Facility 7 Delta, former military installation, converted to CIA use in 2008. 3 levels above ground, 2 below. Prisoner holding is underground, naturally. The blueprints showed a complex that had clearly been designed for security. Multiple entry points, all monitored, electronic locks on every door, camera coverage that left few blind spots. "Security is standard for a black site," Thunder continued. "Cameras, electronic locks, armed guards, 24-hour staffing, probably 15 to 20 personnel on site at any time." "Entry points?" Garrett asked. "Main gate, delivery entrance, emergency exits here and here." Thunder pointed to locations on the blueprint. "But there's also a ventilation system. These older facilities always have oversized ducts because they were built before modern HVAC efficiency standards." Boom leaned in, studying the schematics with the eye of someone who'd spent decades figuring out how to breach secure facilities. "I can blow the main power," he said. "Force them onto backup generators, which will have limited capacity. Cameras go down. Electronic locks default to mechanical backups. Makes it a fair fight." "Timeline?" Garrett asked. Kira made the call, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd led Marines in combat. We go tonight, she said. Every hour we wait, they're moving pieces on the board. Vance might already be compromised. They might be getting ready to eliminate him the same way they eliminated the 11 at Walter Reed. Agreed, Garrett said. Then he looked around the table. Gear up. Full tactical. This is a black op on American soil against a CIA facility. If we're caught, we're traitors. If we fail, we're dead. Everyone understand? 5 heads nodded. These men had understood the risks the moment they'd volunteered 35 years ago. They weren't afraid now. One more thing, Kira said, her voice hard. We bring Vance back alive. No matter what he's done, we need his testimony. That's the only way this works. Alive, Garrett confirmed. But if he resists, we're not taking chances. Wound him if necessary, but he testifies. They spent the afternoon preparing, and Kira found herself learning from these 4 dying warriors in ways that no training course had ever taught her. She inventoried weapons and ammunition with Boom, who showed her modifications he'd made to standard issue equipment using nothing but hand tools and 30 years of experience. Technology fails in the field, Boom said, his twisted hands working with surprising dexterity as he adjusted a trigger assembly. But good mechanical engineering, that never lets you down. She checked vehicles with Wheels, who was preparing a 1991 Humvee that looked like it should be in a museum. No GPS, Wheels explained, no OnStar, no electronic tracking of any kind. They can't follow what they can't see. Old school has advantages, Captain, but it was Hawk who gave her the education that would change everything. Captain, he said, finding her as the afternoon sun started its descent toward the mountains. Heard your scout sniper, Force Recon. Yes, sir. 73 confirmed kills. Afghanistan. Hawk nodded approvingly. Good numbers, but did they teach you old school methods? Sir, come with me. Hawk led her outside to a clearing behind the cabin where someone had set up a 1,200-yard range. 2 rifles waited on a bench. Kira's M40A5 with its modern Schmidt and Bender scope, and Hawk's ancient M40A1 with iron sights that looked like they'd been carried. Technology is good, Hawk said, but it fails. Batteries die, electronics get damaged, moisture fogs lenses, and then what are you left with? He picked up his old rifle, the wood stock worn smooth by decades of handling. Fundamentals never fail. For the next hour, Hawk taught Kira things that no modern sniper school covered. How to read wind using nothing but a piece of yarn tied to the rifle barrel. How to estimate range by the apparent size of a man's head. How to calculate bullet drop in your head using formulas that had been passed down from sniper to sniper since before ballistic computers existed. Watch the yarn, Hawk said. Angle tells you wind speed. 45 degrees, 10 miles per hour. 30 degrees, 5 miles per hour. Doesn't need batteries, doesn't need calibration, just needs you to pay attention. He had her shoot at 1,200 yards using only iron sights and manual calculations. Range 1,200 yards. Wind 8 miles per hour left to right. Temperature 75 degrees. Now calculate. Kira did the math in her head the way Hawk taught her. Bullet drop for .308 Winchester at 1,200 yards was 320 inches, 26.6 feet, like aiming at the top of a 3-story building to hit the ground floor. Wind drift at 8 miles per hour was 10 inches at that range, 0.8 minutes of angle. She dialed in the adjustments without using the ballistic calculator on her scope, just counting clicks the way snipers had done it for 100 years. Breathe. Aim. Squeeze. The shot broke clean. 2.8 seconds of flight time. Then the distant clang of steel. Center mass, Hawk said, checking through his spotting scope. Without all your fancy electronics, just math and practice. That's the fundamentals, Captain. That's what saves you when everything else fails. He handed her the yarn. Keep this. Remember that technology helps, but skill saves. Kira tied the yarn to her rifle barrel, a piece of 10-cent cotton that was worth more than the $3,000 scope. Thank you, Gunny. Don't thank me yet, Hawk said. Thank me when we get through tonight alive. As the sun set, they gathered for a final briefing. Thunder had continued tracing the SD-7 reference while the others prepared, but he'd hit walls. Pentagon files that required clearances, none of them had anymore. We'll get that information from Vance, Garrett said. He has to know who authorized Lazarus. He's been doing this for 40 years. Someone at the Pentagon has been protecting him all that time. He looked at each of them in turn. His daughter, his old teammate Pierce, the 4 warriors who'd become his brothers in this long shadow war. Rules of engagement, Garrett said. CIA personnel are Americans doing their jobs. Most of them have no idea what Blackwell and Vance have been doing. We only engage if directly threatened. Non-lethal force where possible. He paused. But gentlemen, and Captain, if it comes down to you or them, you choose you. Clear? Clear, everyone responded. They checked communications, throat mics and earpieces, analog technology that couldn't be hacked or jammed the way digital systems could. Each person tested their gear. Phantom, check. Kira's voice came through clear. Ironside, check. Garrett's call sign from his original Force Recon days. Boom, check. Callum's voice, steady despite the pain Kira knew his hands must be causing. Wheels, check. Fletcher, already mentally planning extraction routes. Hawk, check. Silas, probably running targeting solutions in his head, even as his vision slowly failed. Thunder, check. Tobias, the strategist who'd planned this operation down to the minute. Watcher, check. Pierce had insisted on coming despite not being a trained operator for this kind of work, but he'd earned his place. Insertion in 3 hours, Garrett said. Until then, rest. Hydrate. Someone check on Phantom. She hasn't stopped moving since we picked her up. Kira looked up from the weapon she was cleaning for the 3rd time. I'm fine, Dad. You're running on adrenaline and grief, Garrett said gently. Take an hour. Close your eyes. We need you sharp tonight, not exhausted. He was right, of course. Kira hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Her body was starting to feel the strain, even if her mind refused to acknowledge it. Garrett seemed to read her thoughts. He sat beside her, taking the weapon and setting it aside. Talk to me, he said quietly. I don't know what to say. You've been alive this whole time. You watched Mom die. You watched me grow up from a distance, and you never reached out. Never let us know. I wanted to. Garrett's voice was rough with emotion. God, Kira, I wanted to so badly. There were 100 times I almost broke, almost called, almost showed up at your door. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through it with fingers that trembled slightly. The poison attacking his nervous system the way it had attacked everything else. He showed her a folder labeled To Phantom. Inside were 21 emails, one for each year since his supposed death. All of them unsent. Kira opened the first one, dated her 8th birthday. My darling Kira, today you turned 8. I watched you from across the street as you played in the yard with your friends. You were wearing that pink dress your grandmother bought you, the one you hated because you said pink was for babies. You're not a baby anymore, sweetheart. You're growing so fast and I'm missing all of it. I wish I could tell you I'm proud. Wish I could tell you that Daddy's still here, still watching, still loving you. But I can't. Not yet. Maybe someday. Stay cold, little Phantom. Love always, Dad. Tears blurred the words. Kira scrolled through more. Her 13th birthday, after her mother died. Her promotion to captain. 21 emails, one for each birthday, each milestone. Naval Academy. Force Recon graduation. Every moment he'd watched from the shadows, unable to reach out. You were always there, she whispered. Always, Garrett confirmed. At your graduation, I was the man in the parking lot with the old Redskins cap. At your promotion ceremony, I left the white roses on your car, your mother's favorite flowers. His voice was thick with emotion. I couldn't be there openly, couldn't hold you or tell you how proud I was, but I never missed a moment that mattered. Kira set down the phone and looked at her father. Really looked at him. Under the weathered exterior, the gray hair, the lines carved by pain and loss, she saw the man who'd thrown her in the air as a toddler, who'd taught her to swim in the base pool, who'd promised to always protect her. And he had protected her, just not in the way she'd ever imagined. I forgive you, she said, for staying away, for letting us think you were dead. I understand now. You were protecting us the only way you could. Garrett pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in years, Kira felt like she was home. They held that embrace for a long moment, father and daughter, warriors both, connected by blood and loss, in a shared mission that would either end in justice or death. When they finally separated, Garrett's eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. Get some rest, Captain. We've got work to do tonight. At 2200 hours, they moved out. 2 vehicles. The Humvee with Garrett driving, Kira in the passenger seat, Boom and Pearson back. The van following with Thunder at the wheel, Hawk riding shotgun with his Barrett, and Wheels in the back monitoring communications. Facility 7 Delta was located in a remote area of Maryland, surrounded by forest and posted with signs warning about government property and authorized personnel only. They parked a mile out in a clearing that Garrett had clearly scouted extensively before tonight. The team moved on foot through the woods, night vision turning the world into shades of green. Through her goggles, Kira could see the facility clearly. 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape, perimeter fence topped with razor wire, guard tower at the main gate, floodlights sweeping the compound on automated patterns. Hawk, you're up, Garrett said into his throat mic. 800 yards away, Silas Whitmore settled into position on a hillside with clear lines of sight to the entire facility. Despite the brain tumors slowly killing him, despite vision problems that would have disqualified most shooters, he was still the best Overwatch Kiera had ever seen. Phantom, I have eyes, Hawk's voice came through the earpiece. 2 roving patrols, 1 at the gate, 1 in the tower, 4 more inside the main building, visible through windows. Boom, ready when you are, Garrett said. Callum Garrett had circled around to the east side of the facility where the main power junction was located. His twisted, arthritic hands worked with tools that should have been impossible for him to hold. But 40 years of experience meant he could rig explosives half-blind and with both hands tied. Charges set, Boom's voice crackled. On your mark, Ironside. Garrett looked at his watch. Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute. The explosion was muffled, carefully calculated to destroy the power system without creating a massive fireball that would alert every law enforcement agency in 3 counties. But the effect was immediate. The floodlights died. The compound went dark, except for emergency lighting that provided maybe 10% of the illumination. Move, Garrett commanded. Kira led the entry team to the fence. Boom had cut a section earlier in the day, hidden by careful camouflage. They slipped through and moved toward the main building with the smooth coordination of operators who'd done this 1,000 times. 2 tangos responding to power loss, Hawk's voice in their ears. Gate guard and 1 from inside, tower guard staying in position. Hawk, can you neutralize tower guard without lethal force? Garrett asked. Negative. Too high, too protected. I'd have to kill him. Then leave him. We go quiet. They reached the building's service entrance. Thunder had already hacked the backup lock system remotely from his position in the van. The door clicked open with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the darkness. Inside was a corridor lit by red emergency lights that made everything look like a scene from a horror movie. Kira moved on point, weapon up, sweeping corners with muscle memory from 6 years of combat operations. Behind her came Garrett, then Boom, his twisted hands somehow still capable of holding a weapon steady. They moved in perfect silence, years of training making them nearly invisible, even in the confined space. A guard appeared at the end of the hallway, responding to the power outage, flashlight beam cutting through the red-lit gloom. Kira didn't hesitate. She closed the distance in 3 seconds, moving with the speed and precision that had made her one of the most effective close-quarters operators in Force Recon, despite her size. Strike to the throat to prevent him calling out. Twist the wrist to disarm. Sleeper hold applied with exact pressure to the carotid arteries. The guard struggled for 8 seconds, then went limp. Kira lowered him quietly to the ground, checking his pulse to confirm he was alive. "One down, non-lethal," she reported. "Copy," Garrett's voice. "Basement access should be 20 meters ahead on your right." They found the stairwell exactly where Thunder's blueprints had indicated. At the bottom was a heavy door with a mechanical lock, old-school security that couldn't be hacked remotely. Boom produced a small, shaped charge, no bigger than a hockey puck. He placed it on the door's hinges, with hands that shook from arthritis, but never wavered from decades of experience. "Fire in the hole," he whispered. The charge detonated with a sharp crack that echoed in the stairwell. The door sagged off its destroyed hinges. Boom and Garrett pulled it aside, and they moved into the basement level. This was where they kept the prisoners. 6 cells, each with a small window in the door. 5 were empty, their occupants either moved or released, or simply never there. The 6th cell held Dr. Elliot Vance. He looked up as they entered, fear and resignation warring on his face. Still in his blood-stained clothes from the hospital, sitting on a concrete bunk in a space that was barely larger than a closet. "Captain Thorne," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Come to kill me?" "Come to save you," Kira replied, "whether you deserve it or not." She shot the lock off the cell door with a single, well-placed round and pulled it open. Vance didn't move, just sat there looking at the 3 armed operators who'd just broken into a CIA black site to extract him. Garrett stepped forward into the dim light, and Vance's eyes went wide. "Thorne? Garrett Thorne? But you're dead. You died in Afghanistan." "Yeah," Garrett said dryly. "I get that a lot." He grabbed Vance's arm and hauled him to his feet with strength that belied his illness. "You walk or you're dragged. Either way, you're coming with us." They moved back up the stairs, but the building was waking now. The sound of the shaped charge had alerted security. Kira could hear voices, footsteps, the metallic click of weapons being readied. "Thunder, we need an exit route," Garrett said into his mic. "North side service door," Thunder's calm voice responded. 20 meters from your position. It's your closest option to the perimeter." They changed direction, moving through a kitchen area that smelled of industrial food and bleach. A guard appeared in the doorway ahead, weapon already raised. This time there was no sneaking up. He saw them immediately and there was no choice. Kira fired first. 2 shots, center mass, the way she'd been trained. The guard went down and didn't get back up. She felt a pang of regret. He was just doing his job. Probably had no idea what Vance and Blackwell had been doing. But there was no time for hesitation. No room for doubt. "Contact," she reported. "Lethal force engaged." "Copy," Garrett said. "Get out of there." They ran now, stealth abandoned for speed. Behind them, more guards mobilizing. Ahead, the north service door that Thunder had identified as their best exit. Boom kicked it open, and they spilled out into the night. Immediately, gunfire erupted from the guard tower. The tower guard had a clear line of sight and was using it, bullets sparking off the pavement around them. "Hawk, I need that tower guard down," Garrett said, and there was steel in his voice now. Command. Authority. The voice of a Marine who'd led men through 3 wars. There was a long pause. Kira knew what Hawk was calculating. That was an American up there, probably some contractor working a security detail, not a CIA black ops specialist. Just a guy doing his job, trying to pay his bills. But he was shooting at them, shooting at the team. And in combat, that calculation was simple. "Copy," Hawk's voice came back, regret clear even through the tiny earpiece. 842 yards away, Silas Whitmore settled the crosshairs of his Barrett M82 on the guard tower. His brain was being eaten by tumors. His vision was failing. He was using a 70-year-old rifle with iron sights that most modern snipers would laugh at. But he'd been doing this for 50 years. And 50 years of experience didn't disappear just because your body was failing. Range 842 yards. Wind 12 miles per hour, crosswind. Moving target. He calculated in his head, no ballistic computer, no laser rangefinder, just math and physics and 10,000 hours of practice. Wind drift 8 inches. Lead the target 6 inches to account for movement. Bullet drop 240 inches at this range. He took a breath, let it out slowly. Heart rate 68 beats per minute, despite the cancer eating through his organs. Finger on the trigger, applying pressure so gradually that even he couldn't say exactly when the shot would break. The Barrett spoke. 1 round, .50 caliber. The recoil would have knocked most men off target, but Hawk rode it like he'd been born to it. 2.1 seconds of flight time. The guard tower went silent. Tower neutralized, Hawk reported quietly. They ran for the fence line, Vance being half-dragged by Garrett and Boom. Behind them, more guards pouring out of the building. Flashlights and shouts and the sound of vehicles starting up. Wheels brought the Humvee roaring up to the fence, tires throwing dirt as he executed a tactical driving maneuver that would have terrified anyone who hadn't spent 40 years doing exactly this. The side door flew open before the vehicle had even stopped completely. They dove in. Vance was thrown into the back seat. Kira landed half on top of Pierce. Garrett and Boom scrambled in after. Wheels was already moving, flooring the accelerator before everyone's doors were even closed. The old Humvee might not have had GPS or modern electronics, but it had a Detroit diesel engine that Wheels had personally rebuilt, and it could move when it needed to. Facility 7 Delta disappeared into the darkness behind them. They'd done it. They'd extracted Vance from a CIA black site, but as the adrenaline started to fade, Kira realized the real battle was just beginning. Casualties? Garrett asked, his voice tight. 1 lethal on our side, Hawk said quietly from his position 800 yards away, breaking down his rifle. The tower guard. No other option. Understood, Garrett said. Not your fault, Silas. You saved the team. There was silence for a moment, the weight of that death settling on all of them. An American killed by Americans. A man who probably had a family, friends, a life beyond this security contract. But he'd been shooting at them, and in the moment, that was all that mattered. Anyone injured? Garrett asked. No one was. They'd gotten lucky. Against a CIA facility with 20 armed personnel, they'd gotten in and out with only 1 lethal casualty, and it hadn't been one of theirs. In the back of the Humvee, Dr. Elliot Vance sat trembling. Not from cold, but from the realization of what had just happened. What was going to happen next? Kira turned to look at him, her eyes hard in the darkness. Welcome to the resistance, Doctor, she said. Hope you're ready to talk. They arrived back at the cabin as the first hints of dawn started painting the eastern sky. 36 hours since Kira had run into that hospital room wearing nothing but a towel. 36 hours since her cover had been blown and her world had turned upside down. Doctor Elliot Vance was secured in the converted bedroom that had clearly been prepared for exactly this purpose. Reinforced door, no windows, a chair bolted to the floor, and zip ties that could restrain someone without causing permanent damage. The rest of them gathered in the main room, exhausted but wired on adrenaline. Garrett made more of that paint-stripping coffee, while Thunder pulled up news feeds on multiple monitors. Nothing yet. The raid on Facility 7 Delta was still under wraps, probably being handled through internal CIA channels that wouldn't report to local law enforcement. But that wouldn't last. Eventually, someone would have to explain how a federal black site got breached and a high-value detainee extracted. How long before they come looking? Pierce asked. They're already looking, Thunder said, his fingers flying across a keyboard. I'm seeing encrypted chatter on channels the CIA thinks are secure. They know we have Vance. Question is whether they know where we are. This location's been clean for 21 years, Garrett said. No paper trail, no electronic footprint. Property's owned by a shell company that's owned by another shell company. They'd need to get very lucky to find us here. Or very unlucky, Boom muttered, cleaning his weapons with those twisted, arthritic hands that somehow never fumbled. Kira stood at the window, watching the sunrise over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Beautiful country, peaceful, the kind of place where warriors came to die when the wars were finally over. Except the war wasn't over. Not for these men, not for her. Let's talk to Vance, she said. They brought him out to the main room. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without the authority of his white coat and his position at Walter Reed. Just a 62-year-old man who'd made terrible choices and was finally being held accountable. Garrett stood in front of him, arms crossed. The others arrayed around the room in positions that were casual but tactically sound, always covering exits, always maintaining clear lines of fire even here in their own safe house. Old habits. I'll testify, Vance said before anyone could even ask. On record, everything I know, but I need protection. Blackwell will kill me the moment he knows I'm talking. Start with Project Lazarus, Garrett said, from the beginning. Vance took a shaky breath. It started in 1989, he began. The Pentagon wanted an edge, something to make our soldiers superior to any potential enemy. The idea was biochemical enhancement. Increase endurance, pain tolerance, healing rates, make our forces unstoppable. You based it on Soviet research, Kira said. It wasn't a question. Yes, research that had been abandoned because it killed the test subjects. But our scientists thought they'd solve the stability problems. Vance's voice dropped. They were wrong. We were all wrong. He explained the testing process. 50 volunteers first, including Garrett, to establish baseline safety. When they showed no immediate side effects, the program expanded to 500 service members deploying to Desert Storm. When did you realize it was killing them? Garrett asked, his voice hard as steel. 2001. 10 years post-injection, subjects started showing symptoms. We ran tests, found that Protocol 7 was causing cellular breakdown at the genetic level. Eventually fatal. No cure, no treatment. Vance looked up, meeting Garrett's eyes for the first time. I recommended we come clean, start research into treatments, offer the best medical care we could to the survivors. But I was overruled. By who? Kira demanded. Deputy Director Gideon Blackwell. He argued that the scandal would destroy the CIA's credibility, end black budget programs, result in criminal charges that would reach into the highest levels of government. He said it was cheaper and cleaner to eliminate the witnesses. Operation Final Rest, Pierce said quietly. Vance nodded. Blackwell's directive. I was given a list of names. Protocol 7 survivors showing advanced symptoms. My job was to make them comfortable until they died naturally. Except that's not what I was really doing. You were executing them, Kira said flatly. I was, Vance struggled for words. Blackwell provided the compounds, gave me specific instructions on how to administer them so it would look like natural progression of their conditions. Heart attacks, strokes, organ failure, all things that were already happening to Protocol 7 survivors, just accelerated. How many, Garrett asked, how many have you personally killed? 11 at Walter Reed. Vance's voice was barely a whisper. All of them Protocol 7 subjects, all of them showing advanced symptoms. Blackwell said I was being merciful, helping them avoid months of suffering. That's not mercy, Kira said. That's murder. I know. Vance looked up and there were tears on his face now. I know what I am, but Blackwell has files on everyone involved. If I'd refused, my family would have been next. He showed me documentation on other doctors who'd said no. They all had accidents, fatal ones. Thunder was typing furiously, recording everything. This confession was gold. This was the kind of testimony that couldn't be suppressed or explained away. "Who else is involved?" Kira asked. "Who authorized Project Lazarus at the Pentagon?" "I don't know the name," Vance said. "Blackwell kept that compartmentalized. But there are files. SD7 files at CIA headquarters in Langley. Those would have the full authorization chain." Boom looked up from his computer. "I can get into Langley's system, but it'll take time. Their cybersecurity is state-of-the-art. 48 hours minimum, maybe 72. "We don't have 72 hours, Garrett said. "The moment Blackwell realizes we have Vance, he'll move to destroy those files." Kira stood up, pacing. Her tactical mind was working through scenarios, calculating odds, planning 3 moves ahead the way her training had taught her. "We don't need to hack in," she said slowly. "We just need to make Blackwell think we already have the information, force him to act. His panic will lead us to the people at the top." Everyone looked at her. "Explain," Garrett said. "We leak Vance's confession," Kira said. "Post it online, send it to every news outlet. Make it impossible to suppress. Include enough detail that Blackwell thinks we have everything. Then we watch where he runs, who he contacts. His reaction will tell us who's really pulling the strings." Pierce nodded slowly. "It's risky. Once we go public, we're fully committed. No going back. They'll come at us with everything they have." "There's no going back anyway," Kira said. "They know who I am. They know about Dad. We're all dead the moment Blackwell gets a clean shot. Our only advantage is speed and publicity. Make it so public they can't just disappear us." Garrett looked at his daughter with unmistakable pride. "That's thinking like a Marine, Captain. Hit hard, hit fast, and don't give the enemy time to recover." He looked around at the others. "We do it," he said. "Thunder, set up recording equipment. We're going to make Dr. Vance famous." For the next 3 hours, they recorded everything. Vance's confession in excruciating detail. The documentation they'd recovered from his office. Medical records showing the progression of Protocol 7 symptoms. Kill orders with Blackwell's signature. They compiled it into a comprehensive file that left no room for doubt. No space for the CIA to claim this was conspiracy theory or Russian disinformation. Just the raw, ugly truth about how the United States government had experimented on its own warriors and then murdered them to cover it up. At 3 a.m., they uploaded it simultaneously to 20 different sites. WikiLeaks, every major news outlet, congressional staffers, military veteran organizations, social media platforms. The file was named simply Project Lazarus, the CIA's murder of 500 Marines. Within 20 minutes, it started trending. Within an hour, major news networks were running stories, their legal teams frantically trying to verify the documents, while their anchors reported on what could be the biggest military scandal since the Pentagon Papers. By dawn, it was the top headline in America. Garrett poured coffee and raised his cup in a toast. "To the warriors who didn't make it," he said, "and to the ones still fighting." "Hoorah," they responded in unison. The war wasn't over, but they'd struck the first real blow, and it was devastating. The calls started coming in at 6 a.m. Senator Elizabeth Hayes, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the director of the FBI, even the White House chief of staff, everyone wanting to know if the Project Lazarus files were real. Garrett fielded the calls while the others monitored news coverage and tracked Blackwell's movements through electronic surveillance that Thunder had quietly established months ago. "Senator Hayes," Garrett said into the phone, "this is Master Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Thorne." "Yes, ma'am. I've been legally dead for 21 years. And yes, every word in those files is true." He listened for a moment. "We have Dr. Elliot Vance in protective custody. He's willing to testify, but we need security guarantees. The CIA has already tried to silence him once." More listening. Then Garrett smiled grimly. "That would be acceptable, Senator. When can you have them here?" He hung up and looked at the team. "Senator Hayes is sending a Marine security detail, full company strength. They'll be here in 3 hours to provide protection and escort us to Washington for testimony. Marines? Wheel said. Hell, we might actually survive this. Don't celebrate yet, Pierce warned, pointing at one of the monitors. On screen was a press conference. Deputy Director Gideon Blackwell standing behind a podium with the CIA seal, looking calm and composed despite the firestorm raging around him. The documents released online this morning are a mix of authentic files and fabricated propaganda, Blackwell was saying. Yes, Project Lazarus was a real medical research program in the 1990s, but it was discontinued when early results proved inconclusive. The allegations of murder are completely false and appear to be the work of anti-government extremists attempting to undermine confidence in our intelligence services. He's good, Boom muttered, making us sound like conspiracy theorists. It won't work, Kira said. We have Vance. We have medical records. We have bodies with Protocol 7 in their systems. Blackwell can spin all he wants, but the evidence doesn't lie. Unless he destroys the evidence, Thunder said. Garrett pulled up a tracking program on his tablet. That's why I put a trace on Blackwell's phone last night when Boom cloned it during our database infiltration. Let's see who he's calling. The list was illuminating. Blackwell had made 17 calls in the past hour, most to CIA officials, probably damage control and crisis management. But 3 calls stood out, all to the same number, a Pentagon extension. Thunder traced it immediately. Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, he said, currently held by Merrick Caldwell, former CIA Deputy Director himself, moved to the Pentagon in 2018. That's our architect, Garrett said. Caldwell created Lazarus. Blackwell executed the cleanup. We get them both, or this doesn't end. Before they could discuss further, Hawk called out from his position on the roof, where he'd been maintaining overwatch. Movement on the access road, multiple vehicles, black SUVs, not military. Everyone grabbed weapons and moved to defensive positions. Through the windows, Kira counted 6 SUVs approaching. At least 20 hostiles, probably more. CIA, Garrett said. Blackwell's making his move. The vehicle stopped 200 yards from the cabin. Doors opened. Armed men poured out, not in tactical gear, but in suits with obvious body armor underneath. Private military contractors probably, the kind the CIA used for deniable operations. A bullhorn crackled. This is Deputy Director Blackwell. You are surrounded. Send out Dr. Vance and surrender, and you will not be harmed. Garrett grabbed his own radio, the old analog kind that couldn't be jammed or intercepted without sophisticated equipment. This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Thorne. We have a Marine security detail en route. Any action you take against us is an act of war against the United States Marine Corps. Stand down. Blackwell's voice came back, and Kira could hear the smirk in it. Your Marines are 2 hours away, Gunnery Sergeant. We're here now. Last chance. Kira moved to a window, assessing the tactical situation with the cold clarity that 6 years of combat had given her. 6 SUVs in a semicircle, 20+ hostiles, all armed. The cabin was defensible with thick log walls and good sightlines, but they were outnumbered 3-1. We hold until the Marines arrive, Garrett said. Hawk, you're free to engage at will. Copy, came Hawk's voice from the roof. The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then Blackwell made his mistake. He ordered his men to advance. Hawk's rifle spoke once. The lead contractor dropped, dead before he hit the ground. The rifle spoke again, another contractor down. Blackwell's men scattered, taking cover behind vehicles. They returned fire, but Hawk was 800 yards away on elevated ground behind cover. They couldn't even see him, let alone hit him. Boom! Give them something to think about, Garrett ordered. Callum Garrett had been preparing for this possibility. He triggered a remote charge he placed near the lead SUV that morning during his pre-dawn reconnaissance. The vehicle exploded in a ball of flame, sending contractors diving for cover. Thunder, sit rep on those Marines, Garrett called. Still 90 minutes out, Thunder replied from his position at the computers. But I've got something better. I called in a favor with a friend at the Pentagon. We've got a Predator drone overhead. Everyone looked up instinctively, though the drone was too high to see with the naked eye. Armed? Garrett asked. Hellfire missiles, 2 of them. And the operator is very interested in protecting American citizens from illegal CIA action. Garrett grabbed the radio again. Deputy Director Blackwell, we have a Predator drone overhead. Armed. If your men don't withdraw in 60 seconds, that drone is going to turn your vehicles into scrap metal. Your call. There was a long silence. Then, reluctantly, Blackwell's voice came through. Fall back. The contractors retreated to their vehicles and pulled out, leaving 2 dead and 1 vehicle burning. But Kira knew this wasn't over. Blackwell was too committed now. He'd try something else. Call in a real military strike. Claim they were terrorists. Something. We need to move, she said. Blackwell knows where we are. He'll be back with more firepower, or he'll fabricate some excuse to call in an airstrike. We can't stay here. Agreed, Garrett said. Wheels, get the vehicles ready. We're relocating as soon as the Marines arrive. But Kira's mind was already working 3 steps ahead. They had Vance. They had evidence. What they didn't have was the name at the top of the food chain. The person who'd authorized Lazarus in the first place. And Blackwell had just called that person 3 times in the past hour. Dad, she said, we can't just wait for the Marines and hope the system works. You said it yourself. The government knew about Lazarus from the beginning. They're not going to help us. Garrett looked at his daughter, seeing where she was going. What are you proposing? We go after Blackwell and Caldwell ourselves, track Blackwell's movements, catch them together, make them confess on camera before we hand them over to the FBI. Pierce raised an eyebrow. That's kidnapping 2 federal officials. They murdered 500 Marines, Kira said coldly. I'm okay with kidnapping. Garrett studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Old school justice. I like it. Thunder was already pulling up intercept data. Blackwell's phone shows he's meeting Caldwell tonight. 2200 hours. Tidal Basin in D.C. That's our window, Kira said. We grab them both, get confessions, then deliver them to the FBI with full video evidence. Make it impossible to suppress. The Marines arrived exactly on schedule. A convoy of armored vehicles with a full company of warriors who looked ready for war. Their commanding officer, a captain named Reeves, approached the cabin with professional wariness. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thorne, Captain Reeves said, offering his hand. 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. Senator Hayes sends her regards. We're here to make sure you get to Washington alive. Garrett shook his hand. Good to see the Corps is still the best, but we need to make one stop first. He explained the plan. Reeves listened, his expression never changing, processing the tactical and legal implications of what Garrett was proposing. That's not part of my orders, Reeves said finally. I know, Garrett replied, which is why you're going to escort Dr. Vance and Colonel Pierce to Washington. My daughter and I have some personal business to attend to. Reeves looked at Kira, seeing the captain's bars on her collar, the determination in her eyes. Semper Fi, Captain, he said quietly. Then to his men, load Dr. Vance and Colonel Pierce. We're moving out. As the Marines prepared to depart, Pierce pulled Kira aside. You're sure about this? No, Kira admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. This is personal, Colonel. They killed my father, or tried to. They destroyed my mother. They murdered 11 men I watched die. I'm not trusting some Senate hearing to deliver justice. Pierce nodded. Then make them pay, Captain, for all of us. The Marine convoy departed with Vance secure in an armored vehicle, and Pierce riding along to ensure the doctor made it to Washington alive. That left Garrett, Kira, and the 4 dying warriors. 6 operators against the entire apparatus of the CIA and Pentagon. Bad odds, but they'd faced worse. We need a plan, Kira said. Blackwell's meeting Caldwell at Tidal Basin at 2200. That's our shot, but they'll have security. Probably a lot of it. I have an idea, Garrett said, but you're not going to like it. He spread a map of Washington, D.C. on the table, marking positions. We split up. Ground team goes to Tidal Basin to grab Blackwell and Caldwell. Overwatch provides support from elevated position. He looked at Kira. Your Overwatch, Lincoln Memorial Rooftop. Range to Tidal Basin is 1,287 yards. You'll have clear sight lines to cover the ground team. Kira understood immediately. Her father was keeping her out of the direct action, putting her in the safest position because she was his daughter, and he'd already lost 21 years with her. No, she said. I should be on the ground team. I'm the best close quarters operator you have. You're also the best sniper, Garrett countered, and this mission needs Overwatch more than it needs another body on the ground. It was sound tactical reasoning, and Kira knew it. That didn't make it easier to accept. Fine, she said, but if anything goes wrong, I'm coming down. If anything goes wrong, you get out, Garrett said firmly. You're 31 years old. You have a career ahead of you, a life. Don't throw it away for revenge. This isn't revenge, Dad. It's justice. Garrett pulled her into a hug. I know, baby girl, I know. They spent the afternoon preparing. Kira set up her position on the Lincoln Memorial rooftop, a location that required some creative breaking and entering, but offered perfect sight lines to the Tidal Basin. She zeroed her rifle, a Barrett M82 chambered in .50 BMG. The big gun was overkill for personnel, but at 1,287 yards with potential for multiple targets, she wanted the firepower. Range 1,287 yards. She ran the calculations in her head, using the methods Hawk had taught her. Wind was 8 miles per hour from the northeast. Temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 73%. Bullet drop at this range would be 380 inches, 31.6 feet. She'd be aiming at the top of a 3-story building to hit ground level. Wind drift would be 9 inches to the right. Coriolis effect at DC's latitude, shooting south across the basin, would add another 1.2 minutes of angle to account for the Earth's rotation. She dialed it all in, not trusting the ballistic computer, but doing the math herself. Old school, the way Hawk had taught her. Pierce arrived despite his orders to stay with the Marines. The old colonel hadn't been able to sit on the sidelines while warriors went into battle. Figured you could use a spotter, he said. Welcome aboard, Colonel. As night fell, Kira and Pierce settled into their position. Below, the city lights sparkled. Tourists walked around the Lincoln Memorial, completely unaware that a sniper was positioned above them, that history was about to be made in blood and justice. At 2200 hours, 2 vehicles arrived at the Tidal Basin. Blackwell and Caldwell, both arriving separately, both cautious. But they weren't cautious enough. What none of them knew was that Blackwell had anticipated this. The meeting was a trap. 30 CIA contractors were positioned around the Tidal Basin, waiting to spring the trap on Garrett's ground team. Kiera saw them through her scope, saw the trap being set, and she had to make a choice. Break radio silence and warn her father, potentially compromising the mission. Or trust that he'd see it too. Trust that a warrior who'd survived 3 wars and 21 years underground could handle himself. She was still deciding when Garrett's voice came through her earpiece. Phantom, I count 30 hostiles. This is a trap. Abort and extract. Negative, Kira replied. I have Overwatch. I can provide support. That's an order, Captain. Pull out. Below, Blackwell's contractors were moving into position. They had Garrett's team surrounded. 4 old warriors, sick and dying, against 30 professional killers. Kira made her decision. Sorry, Dad. Good order. But I don't abandon Marines. She settled behind her rifle and began to work. Shot 1. Blackwell's SUV. Not the gas tank, but close enough. The vehicle exploded in flames, creating light and chaos and giving the ground team a chance to react. Shots 2 and 3. two contractors advancing on her father's position, both headshots at 1,287 yards in darkness, with only firelight for illumination. Both down before they knew what hit them. Shot 4. A spotlight truck that was illuminating the kill zone. The light shattered, plunging the area back into relative darkness. Shots 5 through 8. 4 contractors surrounding Boom, who was pinned down behind a concrete barrier. 4 rounds, 4 targets, 6 seconds. All center mass, all down. Below, Wheels was making a run for the Humvee. A contractor with an RPG was taking aim. Shot 9. Headshot at 1,310 yards on a moving target. The contractor dropped, the RPG falling unfired. Caldwell was trying to escape, running for a backup vehicle. Shot 10. Leg shot. Kiera needed him alive for his confession. The Undersecretary of Defense went down screaming, clutching his shattered femur. She had 2 rounds left in the magazine, 12 shots total, and she just turned the tide of an entire battle with nothing but skill in the training her father had given her decades ago. Pierce was staring at her through the spotting scope. "Captain, I've never seen shooting like that." 10,000 hours of practice, Colonel. Just like Hawk said. Below, Garrett's team was loading into the Humvee. They had Caldwell, wounded but alive. Blackwell was trying to rally his remaining contractors, but they'd lost their stomach for the fight after watching half their number get picked off by an invisible sniper. Kiera and Pierce descended from the Lincoln Memorial and made their way to the rally point. When she arrived, Garrett was waiting. He should have been angry. She disobeyed a direct order, put herself at risk when he'd specifically told her to extract. Instead, he pulled her into a hug. "You disobeyed me," he said. "I learned from you, Dad. You didn't follow orders in 2003 either." Garrett laughed despite everything. "Touché, Captain." They had Caldwell secured in the back of the Humvee, his leg bandaged but still bleeding. The Undersecretary was in shock, both from the wound and from the realization that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. At the safe house, they set up cameras and forced Caldwell to talk. He confessed to everything. Creating Lazarus in 1989, basing it on Soviet research he knew was flawed, authorizing the deployment of Protocol 7 to 500 Marines despite safety concerns, and when the program failed, ordering Blackwell to eliminate the evidence. "It was cheaper than the scandal," Caldwell said, his face gray with pain and defeat. "Cheaper than criminal trials and congressional investigations. Just make the problem disappear." "Where's Blackwell?" Garrett demanded. "He ran, but I know where he's going." Caldwell gave them an address, a safe house in rural Virginia where Blackwell had prepared an escape route. They raided it at 4 a.m. Blackwell was alone, packing a bag, preparing to run to a country without extradition treaties. He saw Garrett and reached for a weapon. Kiera was faster. She put a round through his hand, disarming him without killing him. Blackwell fell to his knees, crying. "I was just following orders," he said. "The Nazis said that too," Kiera replied coldly. They recorded his confession, every detail of Operation Final Rest, every name of every Protocol 7 victim he'd ordered murdered, every lie he'd told to cover it up. Then they called the FBI and delivered both men, along with hours of video confessions and the complete Project Lazarus files. The arrests made international news. The scandal was bigger than Watergate, bigger than Iran-Contra. The CIA director resigned. 3 Pentagon officials were indicted. Congress launched investigations that would run for years. And for the first time in 21 years, Garrett Thorne could stop hiding. 18 months later, Captain Kiera Thorne stood on the beach at Marine Corps Base Quantico, watching the sunrise over the Potomac River. She'd been promoted and assigned as head instructor for a new program, the Scout Sniper and Combat Medic Integrated Training Course, the first of its kind, teaching Marines to both save lives and take them with equal skill. Her first class stood before her, 12 candidates, all women, all determined to prove themselves in a world that still sometimes doubted them. The smallest candidate, barely 5'1", raised her hand. "Ma'am, people keep telling me I'm too small for Force Recon." Kira smiled. She'd heard that before, every day of her career. "They told me the same thing," she said. "Then I got 73 confirmed kills in Afghanistan and helped bring down the biggest CIA scandal in history." She looked at each candidate in turn. Size doesn't define a warrior. Skill does. Discipline does. Heart does. You're here because you earned it. Now prove them wrong. The way I did. The way every woman before you did. The training began with fundamentals. The same lessons Hawk had taught Kira. How to read wind without electronics. How to calculate ballistics without computers. How to make a 1,200-yard shot with nothing but iron sights and mathematics. Technology is a tool, Kira explained, holding up the piece of yarn that Hawk had given her. But tools break, batteries die, electronics fail. Fundamentals never fail. She demonstrated, a target at 1,500 yards, using the yarn to read wind, calculating drop and drift in her head, making the shot with iron sights, the crack of the rifle, the long seconds of bullet flight, the clang of steel. "Center mass," she said. "No computer, no laser rangefinder, just practice. 10,000 hours of practice. There's no substitute, no shortcut." The students were awed. That afternoon, Garrett came to watch her teach. He was weaker now, the Protocol 7 finally winning the battle it had been fighting for 35 years. But he was smiling with pure pride as he watched his daughter pass on the knowledge he'd given her. During a break, Kira sat with him. "How are you feeling, Dad?" "Tired. The doctors say maybe 6 months now, maybe less." "We beat them, Dad. Blackwell, Caldwell, everyone involved in Lazarus. We won." "No, baby girl, you won. I just helped." He handed her a wooden box. Inside was his sniper logbook, 40 years of entries. Every shot, every lesson, every mistake documented in his precise handwriting. "It's yours now," Garrett said. "Use it, add to it, teach from it. When I'm gone, this knowledge can't die with me." Kira felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I promise, Dad, I'll teach them everything you taught me." "I know you will, Phantom." 6 months later, Master Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Thorne died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 62. He was home, with family around him. Kira, his mother Eleanor, who'd been found alive and rescued from CIA captivity. Pierce and his daughter Sloane, reunited after her rescue. The funeral was held at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. A flag-draped casket, a 21-gun salute that echoed across the hallowed ground. Kira stood at attention as they played taps, her eyes dry, her back straight. She was a Marine captain honoring a fallen warrior. The grief would come later in private moments. But here, now, she was strong. After the ceremony, Margaret Whitmore approached, Hawk's widow. "Captain Thorne," she said gently, "Silas wanted you to have this." She pressed something into Kira's palm, a challenge coin from Force Recon. On the back was engraved, "The only easy day was yesterday. He said to tell you that the fight never ends, but neither does the Brotherhood. You're not alone in this." Margaret squeezed her hand and walked away, leaving Kira standing there with the coin warm against her palm and tears finally breaking through her composure. She wasn't alone. She had family. She had her students. She had the legacy her father had left behind. 3 years after Garrett's death, Captain Kira Thorne stood before a new class at Quantico. 20 candidates this time, 12 women, 8 men, all of them chosen, all of them ready to learn. She began exactly as her father had taught her 30 years ago. Fundamentals, discipline, 10,000 hours of practice. There are no shortcuts. Technology can't replace skill. Old school methods aren't outdated, they're just more reliable. She paused, looking at faces eager to learn. My father taught me these methods. His father taught him. Now I teach you. And someday, you'll teach the next generation. That's how warriors live forever, not through medals or kill counts, through knowledge passed down. The class began, and in that moment, Kira felt her father's presence as surely as if he were standing beside her. She pulled out his old sniper logbook and opened it to a fresh page, started documenting the lesson, adding to the knowledge that would outlive them all. Because that was the real legacy, not what you did, but what you passed on. The camera pulled back, showing the beach at Quantico, the sun rising over the water, a new generation of warriors learning from the old, and a voiceover from one of Garrett's old training videos. Kira, if you're watching this, I'm gone. But if you're teaching someone else, I'm not really gone. That's legacy, baby girl, not what you accomplished. It's what you pass on. Knowledge is immortal. Warriors die, but knowledge lives forever. Stay cold, stay controlled, stay compassionate. Semper Fi, Phantom.